Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this interesting knife right here. This is the Ruike P135 SF frame lock steel guy. God, I wish they had names. But to start with, actually, I want to thank my buddy over at Indiana Knives. Indiana Knives is a small dealer over in Bloomington, Indiana, and he donated 5 Ruike knives to the channel. In exchange for, when I'm finished, I have to do a charitable giveaway and support ALS research, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. It's Lou Gehrig's disease, really brutal disease, and so if I can get some reviews and do some good, that's win-win to me. Thanks for that, Indiana. Next thing, size comparison real quick. This guy is actually surprisingly large. I mean, if we put it here next to the Ontario Rat 2, the Ontario Rat 1, and the Spyderco here, yeah, that's a really big freaking knife. It's a big one. And in fact, blade lengthwise, we are coming in, measuring from the furthest extent here, we are coming in just over 3.5 inches, which is, well, not a great thing, but it is what it is. But size-wise, it is a big, big freaking knife. So there's that. Then finally, a quick note on this brand. This is Ruike Knives. This is apparently pronounced Rake if you use the pinyin romanization of Chinese Mandarin. This is a company that is not Ruike Knives. I'm going to say Ruike Knives over and over again because, guys, come on. But Ruike Knives is something very different. Ruike has decided that and they are owned by Phoenix Flashlights, same people, and the knives are made by San Renmu, which is a pretty well-known cutlery maker, sort of, folks. So, there you go. Let's go ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this interesting little knife right here. So on the good side, to start with, ergonomics are great. This fits really well in my hand. It's got some nice swells. The contouring works well. The clip is hot spotty for sure. But the same thing, you know, this is pretty damn good ergonomically speaking. They've done a nice job with that. Next thing, this guy has this little thing, which is something that Ruike Knives does a lot. It is a lock bar lock, where basically, if I slide this over, the knife can disengage fully, no problem. But if I put it this way, and then I slide this forward, what that means is that the lock bar is actually prevented from going too far over, and that prevents the knife from closing. So when this is in this position, this knife literally cannot close, or at least it can't close without destroying the stop pin and then likely a hand, etc. So that's kind of a cool idea. Does it need to be there? No, not necessarily. A well-designed knife lock isn't going to close anyways, but, you know, hey, why not? And it's one of those things that's very low, ideally very low cost, but it's kind of a cool feature, differentiates their stuff a bit. Why not? Next thing, blade on this guy is reasonably nice. It is a 14C28N steel, which is a very good budget steel, and it's reasonably thin stock. I mean, it's a little on the thicker side, but they have to balance this out. But it's ground reasonably thin behind the edge. It's not like, oh my god, but it's decent enough. You know, it's a fine little blade, and then it's a nice shape because you've got a little bit of belly here, you got a little bit of edge, and then nice tip there. And by the way, I'll also highlight that this is a factory edge, yet it's also kind of mirrory, so that's kind of impressive. The factory edge on this is way better than I'm used to coming out of other companies, and it's even a little bit better than some of the Ruikes I've been handling, Ruikes I've been handling lately. You guys, change the name. So there's that. Next thing, design-wise, this guy has a nice backspacer here. It's flush in the back, and it also hides a very unobtrusive lanyard hole that goes all the way through within the G10 there, and so it's not possible to, like, cut the lanyard or anything like that using the knife as the knife is closed, so that's kind of a nice little thing. And frankly, if you don't use a lanyard, you're never going to care that it's there, so that's good. And then finally, the clip on this guy allows for a pretty deepish carry. It's, you know, it comes down to about here, and that's pretty solid. That's a nice deep carry clip. So, yet this little arrangement means you've got a fair amount of grip to pull it on out of there, even including the lanyard hole. So, to me, all of that is the good. Pardon me, that it is a relatively deep carry, nice unobtrusive lanyard hole, a nice blade, a lock bar block, which is nice and good ergonomics. On the great side, you know, it's kind of hard to characterize this, but at some level, this just feels like it should be a more expensive knife than it is. Not if you think about it very strongly. Like, if you realize, like, if you look at this on the table, you're like, wow, that's a pretty attractive knife. Flip it over, wow, that's a pretty attractive knife. You pick it up, and then you remember, oh, this is steel. Oh, this is 14C28N. Like, yeah, okay, it's a $50 knife. But the thing is, at the end of the day, this is a well-contoured frame lock sort of knife with a big chunk of blade. This looks like something that ZT would do, or another company would do for a lot more money. And so the fact that you could get a knife that looks like this for 50 bucks is actually kind of impressive. And so to me, that's kind of what's great here, is that it feels like it's higher in the price bracket than it actually is. And that's kind of a neat trick, although it's kind of a gimmick as well. I don't know how to feel about that, but it is what it is, and that is what it is. That's the great. Just feels a little bit maybe higher end than it actually is. On the bad side, to start with, as you saw in the disassembly, the centering is just not there. Unfortunately, there is, and I think it may be due to a really asymmetrical grind that's making this blade kind of come over this way, or maybe it's just poorly centered. I don't know exactly what's wrong, but something's wrong in there. And, at 50 bucks, I can't get too bent out of shape, but at the same time, guys, come on. Next thing, it is pocket pecking a little bit here. You've got a pocket pecker coming on here that's going to peck on whatever's in your pocket all day long. It helps a little bit that there's this kind of purling away that makes it a little harder to hit the flipper tab, but still, yeah. It's a thing. Next thing, the pivot, unfortunately, on this guy does tend to loosen itself up over time. I tightened this guy right after, well, actually, during my disassembly, carried this for a couple of days, and then it is no longer tight again. That's just not very good. I'm not a big fan of that here. Maybe I can try a little tighter, see if I can get it back to where it needs to be. Yeah, it's a little better. Good. So, but the self-loosening pivot, not a thing I love. Next thing, the balance on this guy. This is a steel frame lock. The back handles here are just chunks of stainless steel. They've got a lot of internal milling. That helps a lot. But the balance on this guy is still relatively far back. It's not the end of any worlds. It's not like dangerously far back, but it still definitely feels back heavy, and it feels a little unwieldy as a result. I'm not a big fan of it in that domain. But that's always a problem when you make a steel frame lock. It just doesn't work out all that well in that way. And then next thing, the detent on this guy. You've probably seen a couple of missed flips during the course of this. This is a so-so detent. It is strong enough that most of the time, especially if you kind of preload it a little bit, you can get a full flip on this guy, no freaking problem. And that's good, absolutely 100%. But the thing is, it's not a stellar action, and it's very gritty. You can hear this. That's fully lubricated. It's not like this is, you know that I'm going to lubricate this knife, but yet still it has that scratchitude to it. I don't know exactly what's making that happen in there, but it's just not a great action. This feels like it was kind of underdone in the action department, and it certainly doesn't. With that blade this big and heavy, you'd think it would, fall shut, but instead you kind of need to fall it shut. And that's just not great. And so the action on this guy is not very good. And then finally on the bad side, this is maybe a little bit more subjective, but it kind of also isn't, I don't know. This design feels very, very derivative. It's not like an homage or a clone. I'm not going there. I'm not saying this is a design that, is like, oh, you should be ashamed. It's not somebody else's work, but at the same time, it's a little surprising that it isn't. I look at this guy and I see, for instance, the ZT456. Had they stretched that knife out a little bit, that would be exactly what we've got here. Or there's a lot of Konigarius in here, especially, this is a design that just doesn't feel terribly unique. And Ruike actually has some designs that do feel pretty unusual, like this little warny guy. Feels pretty unusual. I mean, they've made some knives that are kind of out of left freaking field. But this feels very kind of middle of the road, and like it's sort of the average of a bunch of the flipper frame locks that we see right now in the knife world. And that's just not thrilling. Is it bad? No, not necessarily. And in fact, some would argue that it's good, because it looks a lot like the more expensive knives that it's way cheaper than. But at the same time, I don't know. Yeah, so the design is derivative. All the bad is that the design's derivative. The detent isn't very good, and the action isn't very good either. The balance is a little far back because of the heavy steel frame lock thing. The pivot loosens itself. It's definitely pocket packing a little bit, and the centering on this guy is way off. Unfortunately, or something's wrong with it. The ugly part, you see me grabbing the scale, is that this is a very heavy knife. We are coming in here at 5.93 ounces. Holy crap, and that's for a blade that's just a little over 3.5 inches, which, by the way, I could also put in as bad because it's coming in just over a legal line rather than just under. But still, 5.9 ounces for 3.5 inches. This guy is heavy. And given that the balance is also a little wacky, this is a knife that if I saw this just sitting on a table, I have one set of expectations because I'm used to a lot of titanium-style frame locks. And then I reach and I pick it up, it's like, whoa, okay, that's why it's cheap. And, steel frame locks kind of feel that way. Steel frame locks, they're okay. They're cheap. That's the only nice thing that can be said about it. But there's a reason that higher end companies use, or frankly, regular companies use titanium for their frame locks. Because if you make it out of steel, it's going to just feel really freaking heavy. They've done a lot of work to mitigate that. They've done a lot of internal milling. I mean, it's clear that they're doing what the absolute best they can while making this out of steel. But to me, at least, that weight still, and the balance and the unwieldiness that comes with it, make this feel not great. I'm going to be honest with you there. And so it's very, very clear to me that, yeah, this is a big compromise. Making this out of steel, it's a great knife, but going there was just like I don't want to say it's a cut corner because it's a design decision. That's what they had to do to hit this price point. I'm not complaining that it's not made out of titanium for $50, but at the same time, that's why people don't make $50 flipper frame locks. Instead, they make them more expensively out of titanium. So, to me, that's what's ugly, is that this is a super heavy knife, and that's kind of a... like steel frame locks is something I'm always a little skeptical of. Final conclusion-wise, look, there's a lot to like here, absolutely. It's a nice design, it's a nice blade, it's an action that does the trick. And it does feel and it does look a lot higher end, I think, than the price would indicate otherwise. I mean, this is, in many ways, a substantially nice knife, and I can see somebody owning this and being very happy with it, being very proud of it. But the thing is, it is also a knife with some troubles. I mean, the build quality isn't great. With the action, the grittiness of it, the lack of centering or the weird grind, I'm not quite sure which, and a design that is kind of vanilla at best and very derivative going beyond that, and then it's just really freaking heavy. And the thing is, but I am really of two different minds on this, because I know that I'm a bit of a snob. I regularly carry much more expensive knives than this. And so it's like, how do I balance those two things? At some level, I look at this and I'm like, this is a great value choice. If you are in a situation where $50 is really the high end that you can go, this gets you a flipper frame lock. And at that level, yeah, I support it. It's a nice idea. But at another level, there's a part of me that looks at this as being very much a compromise knife. What I mean by that is that, I look at this and it's like, well, sure, you could do this for $50, but you could do a lot better if you spend a little bit more money, if you keep saving. This is that buy once, cry once thing, and I have a review up of that idiom, I actually do. But, I love frame locks, but steel frame locks always, to me, feel like a bit of a compromise. And I think that for the amount of money that you're paying here, you can do a little bit better. I mean... okay, for instance, if you're willing to go with an assisted action, you can get the Kershaw link here. This is a sprint run. It was like, I think, $80, but you can get a regular one for $35. That really does a lot of similar things in terms of design that is, frankly, I think the ergonomics are a little bit better on this, and the only real downside to it is the assist on it. That's an ugly situation. But if you want to pay a little bit more, if you're willing to keep saving, you can do a lot better. If you save up, and it is, again, twice the price, but you can go to the Ferrum Forge Mass Drop Crux, which comes in at like $120. That is a knife that is just miles and miles and miles ahead of this. That is a steel frame lock that will make you fall in love with, that is a titanium frame lock that makes you fall in love with titanium frame locks. You can also do like the Kaiser Cordo or the Kaiser Gemini. Again, you're spending more money here, but it's just not necessarily, I don't know. And so that's my worry here. If I were to try and compartmentalize this very abstract kind of concern, is like, you could buy this knife for $50, but the question is whether in 6 months you'd be looking at this guy and going, I really wish I'd kept saving and then gotten a knife for $100 that was, well, just better, or $150 or something like that. If you want a frame lock, save up and do a frame lock. Do a serious frame lock rather than doing one of these guys that's very, very compromised. And especially given that you can also get much better knives for under $50. I mean, honestly, I would carry this guy over this. I would carry the Ontario Rat number 1 here in D2 steel, about the same size, over this guy any day of the week. This just cuts a little bit better. The steel's a little bit better. There's a lot more there. I don't know. But, so that's kind of where I feel. I mean, if something over $50 is just not doable for you, if your price range is never going to accommodate actually saving up for a Ferrum Forge Mass Drop Crux or a Kaiser, any of their Kaiser frame locks, then okay, I guess this may be the best that you're going to do, and you know what, it's not bad for that. But you know what, if it's a question of doing this guy now or keeping on saving and doing something else later, honestly, I'd keep saving, because this is a very nice piece, but it's a piece that's just very heavily compromised by that price point, and I think that you can do better for $50, or you can wait and do way better than this if you're willing to spend a little bit more money. So I don't know. It's tough to say. There's a lot to love here. I can see why a lot of people love it, and but I don't know. Yeah, I'm conflicted here. Draw from that what you will, though. Luckily, you're the one buying it, not me. Hope this has been interesting to you, and have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.